Okie dokie. So for anyone who doesn't know what I'm up to or new here or you're watching later on YouTube's or whatever's, we read and review philosophy. This is the Phenomenology of Adventure by Simon Gusman in comparative and continental philosophy. This is already published philosophy, and so we're going to go see what this is about. It's got the second line Simmel, Sartre, de Beauvoir, and Jankelevich. I don't know how to say these names. I'm sorry if I fuck it up, but whatever. And yeah, feel free to ask questions as we go, but I just think this sounds like a really cool topic, phenomenology of adventure. I mean, Shane was in here, and his call is adventure when you go on a raid. So it's like this is something interesting. Like this is like I like phenomenology, and I mean I'm an analytic philosopher mostly, but a little promiscuous. I do like some continental. I do like touch on phenomenology, and so it's like where do you find adventure, and what is it to be like adventurous, like to have the experience of adventure? And that's hopefully what we're going to be talking about here. So let me know. And my first time reading it, I'm not endorsing this as always, just seeing if it's good. If it's crap, we say so, and we review it at the end. So if you stick around to the end, you get to be part of the review, and the review goes up on a website. And this video will hopefully also make it to YouTube and be on my VOD channel in the future. All right, so here we go. Adventure plays a significant role in our society. Many would prefer an adventurous life to an ordinary one. See this? This is already something interesting. Like, many would prefer an adventurous life to an ordinary one. Do we? Well, many would. See, this author's already careful, but like it's interesting. Would you prefer an adventurous life? And what counts as adventure for you? Like, there are radically different things people consider adventurous. So, yeah, already like interesting questions. Commercials and popular culture aptly play into this desire by showing us all kinds of adventurous content. Although prevalent, the term adventure is very broad. It can be applied to a variety of diverse experiences such as traveling and love affairs. Yeah, exactly. So we're already going different places, different people. Like we're going to different countries, and we're going into different people, love affairs. Stockton says, well, I've been frustrated as a Hispanic who knows two languages that there is not enough resources to learn Spanish. For English speakers, nothing easy to gain vocabulary easily. And so I'm coding a program for LLM for grammar and vocabulary, but I'm not going to reveal more than that. That's very cool. Like you're doing a some sort of language acquisition program. Super cool, Stockton. Very cool. Yeah, I downloaded as a resident of New York State. I can access the New York City Public Library system. I have a New York City Public Library card. They, as a block, buy contracts with like language learning apps. So I have access. If anyone else is in New York State, you should check, or your state, if you're in the United States, you should check with your like library system. You may have access to paid versions of like language learning programs. And so I have something called Mango Languages that I've been meaning to do forever. And now that my brother lives in a French-speaking area of Belgium, that I would like to learn French so I can talk to my nephews in French. So it's like, this is one thing I would like to do, but like, this has like many languages. Like I could learn French, I could learn Japanese, I could get my Spanish is atrocious, but I could learn it better. So it's like, yeah, interesting stuff. All right, back to the paper. The appeal of adventure has to do with breaking free from the dullness of everyday life into something exciting and significant, whatever it may be. I mean, I was listening to people talk about video games. Why do people play video games? It's because you feel like the decisions you make in the video game are significant. A lot of what we do in everyday life is drudgery, and we do it because we have to. But like when you're in the video game, like you're shooting a gun, you're killing something. It's like it feels like it has significance, and you can tell when a game is stupid because none of your decisions matter. Your decisions have to matter in the video game, otherwise it's not worth it. Why do you come on Twitch? Is because you get to chat, and your chat gets to matter, as opposed to you just like put it up on a YouTube comment. Nothing matters there. So, but like here, I read it, or like other people read it in real time. So, yeah. So, exciting and significant. Okay, many stories we tell, ranging from the oldest myths to contemporary Hollywood movies, are centered around protagonists who go on adventures. Yeah, Odysseus. Odyssey. Such adventure stories have been studied by many philosophers and cultural scholars. Furthermore, the notion of adventure has been studied in the context of specific kinds of adventurous activities in the field of tourist studies. Unreal Brian says, when I was a kid, standards were lower. Gobbling power pellets seemed to matter. It does matter. I mean, your quarters, you only had a limited number of quarters. The arcade style game, I know you're making a joke, but like, you're talking to someone who designed a Minesweeper client. I'm going to try to go to Spain to go to the Minesweeper World Championships in September. The idea of like what is actually grabbing you in arcade style games matters a lot to me. I put a lot of time and effort into this, and like, they're using my software to run a Minesweeper part of a Minesweeper tournament this fall or this September. So the idea that you were putting quarters into machines to gobble power pellets, like, well, you had a limited number of quarters, and how do you get the kids to keep doing that? The standards were not lower because you were paying a lot of money for that. I mean, I have an original fucking Tron poster in my room right over there. Like, I do. Like, it's like I had to pay a lot of money for that. Okay. What we will discuss in this article are not the adventures of fictive heroes nor specific touristic activities. Instead, we will inquire into the fundamental question: what is it like for an ordinary person to go on an adventure? And I'm thinking, I've got Shane here, might be in chat, might not be, but like the Lord of the Rings, where the hobbits go on these grand adventures. And like that asks the question, begs the question, even though it's a terrible phrase: what actually counts as an ordinary person? Okay, in other words, we will delve into what constitutes the experience of adventure. To go on an adventure is always a kind of experience. A better understanding of what constitutes an adventure allows us to see what the various kinds of adventurous experiences have in common. This in turn leads to a deeper understanding of the concept of adventure in general, which enables a better understanding of the contemporary cultural prominence of adventure, namely as something that springs from our desire for our experiences to be meaningful. And so this is what I was saying earlier about why video games like this, we want to have meaningful questions. Our experiences should be meaningful. Yeah, so this has always been the point in some sense in recreation, is to get out of your everyday grind, I guess you might say. All right. This explicit focus on the meaning of experience requires a phenomenological approach. The philosophical school of phenomenology investigates the structures of experience. Phenomenologists have studied many extraordinary experiences that are fundamental to our existence. For example, experiences of anguish by Heidegger and Sartre, the study of boredom by Heidegger, and the description of nausea found in Sartre's novel of the same name. Lesser known are the studies of what it is like to go on an adventure. This neglect is unfortunate because of the significant role that adventure plays in our culture. And Wittgenstein had a book called The Varieties of Religious Experience that he really liked, apparently. So there was a book called The Varieties of Religious Experience, and he like studied that book. And so it's an interesting thing, like, what are the different things we consider to be religious experiences? And is that an adventure? Like, you can see how that's not even that far. Like, you might be considering boredom or anguish, but what's the experience that goes with a religious awakening or something like that? Okay. In order to tackle the question concerning the phenomenology of adventure, we will compare four theories. As we will see, some address the question directly, while others do so indirectly. Some of them are explicitly part of the phenomenological tradition, while others are not. The first of these four thinkers is Georg Simmel. In his essay, The Adventure, Simmel focuses solely on our question. The question is also discussed by the protagonist of Jean-Paul Sartre's novel Nausea, and is elaborated upon in his war diaries and other texts. The third thinker is Simone de Beauvoir, who addresses adventure as an ethical attitude in the ethics of ambiguity. The fourth is Vladimir Jankelevich, who discusses the notion of adventure, boredom, seriousness. Unreal says William James. I was just thinking of him because his radical empiricism would likely have something to say as opposed to phenomenology. I don't know what the result regarding adventure would be, though. Yeah, like, this is why I like jumped on this paper. I think it's a great topic. I am a little bit always I have a soft spot for picking interesting topics to go discuss. So like this is something I haven't heard about. So I was like, let's go do that. Also, we've discussed like travel before. I have a soft spot for New York City. I'm from here, and it's like, well, discussing travel in cities and going places also is a topic I like. So it's like there's going to be a lot of overlap between different areas of stuff to talk about, and I wonder what William James would have to say too. Like that would be, would be interesting. Okay, although these thinkers pose similar questions and provide us with similar answers, they are not always explicitly drawing from each other's work. It does not seem that Sartre or de Beauvoir was aware of Simmel's essay, and Jankelevich, in turn, did not know Simmel's essay, but not Sartre or de Beauvoir's writing on that matter. This gives us further reasons to compare their theories. Although each of these thinkers gives his or her own spin on the phenomenology of adventure, some general characteristics can be drawn. We're missing a few words. This is not the best edited essay. Being drawn from their works. As we will see, these are the ideas that adventure exists primarily in contrast with everyday life, that they have a goal-directed structure in which something needs to be achieved, seduced, or conquered, and that they have a different character in hindsight than they have in the moment in which they are lived. This is like already like interesting stuff, like, that they change over time, and like there is some goal, but like the goals are very different. So situate him, I know Jankelevich as a Bergson scholar. Okay, interesting, yeah. So this is all in the continental tradition. I have no idea who any of these people, like any of their writings. I have not read. I read The Stranger by Sartre in high school, and my opinion of that was that Sartre was a fucking pussy. I think that's like the quote I used when I was 17. It's probably not my opinion now, but like, yeah, I thought he was a wuss. And then like everyone else, like these are not authors I know. Okay, we will discuss the thinkers in the order of the publication of their texts on adventure. We will start with Simmel in the second section, who sees adventure primarily in the contrast with everyday life, and hence as discontinuation. Afterwards, in the third section, we will turn to Sartre, who discusses the illusory nature of adventure. In the fourth section, we will turn towards the idea of the adventurer as conqueror, as presented by de Beauvoir. Last in section 5, we'll turn to Jankelevich's idea that adventure is a perpetual anticipation of the future. Okay, I already like this author. They set up their problem. They didn't waste time explaining stuff. They just gave a very short outline. I always appreciate, like, you kind of have to give a small outline now, because otherwise, the reviewers freak out and editors freak out, like, we don't know what you're talking about. Yeah. But like, so I already like this setup. They presented very quickly different perspectives and said, all right, and this is how we're going to discuss it. Unreal says, Sartre's critique of dialectical reason, I picked it up once and gave it up quickly. Thought it was just word salad. Learned later he wrote it all in 600 pages while on a cocaine bender. Yeah. Welcome to philosophy, where not everything is what you think it is. Like, apparently Heidegger wrote a lot of Being in Time in like a very short period because he needed to get it done for his tenure review. So it's like it's a huge book, but like he wrote the introduction and then he blew through a lot of the rest of it. It's like, who knows how that got done? Like, and there's always the old story of Leibniz. The amount of papers that Leibniz wrote, like the amount of pages, is some ungodly amount. It's literally not understood how there was enough time in the day that he wrote it. It's thought that he must have been an insomniac and slept only like 1 or 2 hours a night and was just writing for like days on end. So it's like some of this stuff we just don't know. Or we do know, and it's crazy. Okay. Simmel, adventure as discontinuation. Simmel's essay, The Adventure, relates to our purpose in the most direct sense, as he aims to solve precisely the question of what constitutes an adventure. He emphasizes the break with everyday life and the goal-oriented structure, giving us a first insight into the phenomenology of adventure and giving us some guidelines to better understand the other authors. He starts his study of adventure with the idea that there is a difference between the meaning of an experience as it is on its own and how it relates to a life as a whole. He says, each segment of our conduct and experience bears a twofold meaning. It revolves about its own center, contains much breadth and depth, joy and suffering, as the immediate experience gives it, and at the same time is a segment of a course of a life. Unreal says, Peirce's unpublished writings are kind of like that. I think I've heard the figure of 80,000 manuscript pages. Yeah, I mean, I did not know that it was that large. I knew there were very big books of Peirce's collected like notes. Like I knew there was just like edition after edition after edition of that. But like yeah, so that's impressive on Peirce. I heard once that apparently Peirce had read every single possible text that was available during his lifetime on Logic. Like it looks like he had read all the things. Doesn't mean he understood everything like correctly or got everything right, but it looks like he had read almost everything that you could have read about Logic, like during his lifetime. Okay. Examples of this twofold meaning are plentiful. When one does something for the first time, for example, it may be experienced as new and exciting, while one does something when one does something regularly, it loses these qualities, although the experience itself remains virtually identical. Well, that's a weird thing. Does the experience remain identical after you've done something a million times? Now, the empirics of it might, like you have to go through the same motions, but like your experience is very different, and that's the question here. What's the phenomenology of it? Like, back when I was a kid, playing tic-tac-toe seemed fun. Tic-tac-toe does not seem fun anymore. Like, it's a solved game. You know all the different outcomes. There's only so many of them. You start here, you go there, and like, either one person's going to win, other's going to lose, or it's going to be a draw. It's like, it's not a big deal. Writing X's and O's, yes, that's exactly the same. But the experience itself, well, I experienced tic-tac-toe very different from when I was a little kid. Author continues, one could think of a first kiss compared to a kiss of a couple that has been together for decades. Both experiences have different functions in the chain of events that constitutes our life as a whole. Quote, events which may be widely divergent in their bearing on life as a whole may nonetheless be quite similar to one another. Or they may be incommensurate in their intrinsic meanings, but so similar in respect to the roles they play in our whole existence as to be interchangeable. Yeah, so the physical doing of it may be the same, but the experience is completely different. Yeah, the event. So they're using event talk. So the events may be different, but then the meanings may be the same. Yeah, so we've got a few different concepts right there. I don't think it matters. The second category of experiences could be those that share their character of being new and exciting, but that are very different nonetheless. One's first kiss and the first time one publishes a book, for example, differ greatly in their substance, but may have a similar role as a sort of rite of passage in the course of life. This distinction between the significance of an event in itself and the significance of an event to a life as a whole is what allows Simmel to determine the nature of adventure. Quote, the most general form of adventure is its dropping out of the continuity of life. Quote, subquote, wholeness of life, end quote, after all, refers to the fact that a consistent process runs through the individual components of life, however crassly and irreconcilably distinct they may be. What we call an adventure stands in contrast to that interlocking of life links, to that feeling that those countercurrents, turnings, and not still, after all, spin forth a continuous thread. End quote. Thus, Simmel's idea that the events of our life have meaning in light of each other is what allows him to define adventure. Those are the experiences that have a significance that is not related to the other events that surround it. Adventure exists in contrast with everyday life because everyday life consists of a coherent chain of events. I wouldn't put it this way, but I think this makes sense. There's one narrative of like your life as you live it, like your everyday life. So like there's like, I have a desk job. I do things at my job that are pretty fucking boring. Like I do that stuff. And like, there's things that go on, and everything that I do at work makes sense in a work environment in some sense. Then I come on here and like I do Twitch. And you could say that like being a Twitch broadcaster is a very different sort of thing than having a desk job where I push papers from that side of my desk to that side of my desk. That's literally what I do. And so like they're like you're talking about different narratives here, and so like the idea that like one doesn't relate to the other. Well, of course they do relate to each other somehow because I have to be the one doing all of these things. But like the adventure is somehow radically different from like the everyday narrative that goes on usually. Okay. A consequence of adventure standing out from the experiences of ordinary life is that it has a much more clear beginning and ending. Quote, we ascribe to an adventure a beginning and an end much sharper than those to be discovered in the other forms of our experiences. The adventure is freed from the entanglements and concatenations which are characteristic of those forms, and it is given a meaning in and of itself. Of our ordinary experiences, we declare that one of them is over when or because another starts. They reciprocally determine each other's limits and so become a means whereby the contextual unity of life is structured or expressed. The adventure, however, according to its intrinsic meaning, is independent of the before and after. Its boundaries are defined regardless of them. Yeah, so the everyday life, my having the desk job, it just goes on forever. It's like, just keeps going. It's the same shit every like few days or whatever. But like if I go and do something fun, that fun thing stands apart. It's just a small aside. This reminded me of one of my friend's older sisters. She's a good person. She went and hiked Mount Kilimanjaro and met her husband there. And they married and they're down. Well, I think they're in the DC area now. I salute you. Thank you for the follow. Hi, PD. Her husband was this kind of, apparently before he met her, this kind of like idle. He came from a moneyed family. He didn't have to do anything and was just kind of like wasting away, just like having fun. When he met up with her, she sort of kicked his ass and got him, he like whipped him into shape and then like he actually started doing shit. So it's like he went off on this adventure not because he was like really looking to adventures, just like this is what you do as like a guy who has money and has time. And that's like, so then like all of a sudden, but by hiking Mount Kilimanjaro, getting out of his just sort of like fun he was having around here, that like, or I guess not around here, but I think he's from the DC area, but that sort of like made a hard break with his everyday just sort of idleness. It's kind of interesting how these things happen. Okay. The contrast with everyday life causes adventures to have much more strictly defined boundaries. Simmel compares this to an island which is land surrounded by something else, water, as opposed to different areas on a continent which consists of land surrounding simply by other lands. This aspect is something that is not only a consequence of the contrast with everyday life, but it is also something that we experience. We feel that an event leads us astray from the path of everyday events because of its novel nature. And yeah, this is just like the story about my friend's older sister and her husband. Furthermore, the contrast with the ordinary course of life is also why an experience of a similar nature can be an adventure at one time in life, while it may not seem one at another time, regardless of what kind of experience it is. It all comes down to the contrast with other experiences. It is for that reason that a first encounter with a new lover feels like an adventure, while sitting on the couch next to this person every day in an established relationship does not. It can also be the other way around, where an activity used to be normal, one could think of partying in one's adolescence, and becomes less frequent and hence more adventurous as one gets older. Still, Simmel stresses that adventure is much more prominent in one's youth. Hey, Valpo. What's going on here? Oh, fuck you, Twitch. I don't need extra messages saying you've got a 100-hour limit. Yeah, we're doing some phenomenology today, Valpo. So, I like phenomenology. I hope you're doing well. I hope I think you may have been participating in the APA Central. I hope that went well. I didn't see what you were talking about with Aris on his stream the other day, but who knows. Okay. Yeah, we're talking adventure. Change to put his hat on. Okay. Yeah. On this topic of times changed and different things are adventures. You get older, you get more injured. It could just be an adventure going to the store. There was back in the days before social media took over everything, there was group blogs. And I think on New Apps, there was one of these authors who was part of the New Apps blog which is still active. Gordon Hull still posts there, and he posts interesting stuff. But one of the authors, I think, got some neurodegenerative disease, and he wrote on this topic of how it used to be nothing to go to the corner store, and then all of a sudden going to the corner store was like hiking up a mountain. All of a sudden, took all of his effort, all of his focus, everything. And so he was writing on this topic about, he said, I don't want sympathy. I'm writing this because it's actually a philosophically interesting thing, how your view of the world changes with like this neurodegenerative disease. But yeah, that was a while ago. That might be a good like 13 years ago, 15 years ago, who knows. Okay. Yeah, this was web, not 3 or 4.0, but like it's just so far back in like web years. All right. Yeah, pre-social media taking over everything days. All right. Anywho's. That does not mean that adventure is not meaningful, just that its significance is not determined by the events that immediately precede nor those that follow it. It stands out and therefore has a meaning in and of itself. In that sense, despite its accidental nature, its extraterritoriality with respect to the continuity of life, it nevertheless connects with the character and identity of the bearer of that life. End quote. It is obvious that the adventurer is still the same person, and hence Simmel hints at a deeper meaning of the significance of adventure for life as a whole. On the one hand, adventure exists in contrast with everyday life. On the other hand, it has significance for everyday life precisely because of its independent meaning. This is the case because adventure contains elements of everyday life in a more concentrated form. What the fuck does that mean? More concentrated life? I mean, Unreal Brian brought up the pragmatists. This is a theory of a pragmatic theory of aesthetics. A lot of times say, well, that's what art is. It's compressed experience going down into, like you're compressing a lot of experience into one art piece. Book's not there. There's art as experience. Well, it was there at one. Don't know where it is now. You like new apps? Yeah, I like new apps too. Yeah, old internet philosophy references. So yeah, but but yeah, there is something to this. But what does it actually mean to have everyday life in concentrated form? Like, I'm not like, you need a theory to explain that, because I don't know what it is to concentrate life. There's not like a life force that we can squeeze out of people and like drink it like vampires to make us live longer or something. Okay. In everyday life, these features are often dissolved, while in adventure, they are present more prominently. One of these aspects is the goal-directed structure of the adventure. This has to do with the tension between the active and passive, and the certain and uncertain aspects of life. This boils down to the idea that some things that happen to us are consequences of our own actions and are hence active, and some things overcome us and are passive. All right, I have no fucking clue exactly how this all... I mean, I have a general idea what this means, but like, if there's any sort of background theory here that makes sense of this, I don't know. I mean, the idea that like you've gotten out of your everyday routines, and so you have, in some sense, ceded control of your everyday life, or at least you've changed what is controlling your everyday life. Like, I go to work, I understand there's like an institutional structure there. I don't go to work, there is no institutional structure. And if I go on a vacation or trip somewhere, well, then the structure of those institutions, I have no idea what's going on. That will affect me in a different way. So it's like you're changing like what's actively and passively affecting our life is different. Okay. Usually these aspects of life fit together organically, as is in the case of our work. Yeah, is what I'm talking about. Like, there's a whole institutional system there. Makes that place run. Or not run, as it were sometimes. We perform the actions required of us, and we gain something in return. For example, when we grow crops, we must tend to them and patiently reap the rewards. This implies both activity and passivity. It also implies certainty and uncertainty. Our practical knowledge makes us able to predict the consequences of our actions, but only to a certain degree. We can never fully predict the circumstances that may influence these consequences, such as the weather. Socknow says, I want to see life, but more and more real and everyday life in concentrated forms is what they are intending. Yes, that I completely agree. I think I agree with you. I think what they're saying makes sense. I'm just saying, how the fuck does that happen? How do you concentrate life? Like, how? Like, what does that mean to concentrate it? Like, I get what they're going for, but like, this is the difficulty. Like, we all want that. We want like life to be good and like rich. You know, rich is just another word for concentrated. What makes life rich? What makes it concentrated? Well, I don't know. So that's a philosophical question. Like, you go to Aris place. That's the whole point of Aristotle's philosophy, is you want to live a life well lived, a good life. What counts as the good life? What counts as a rich life? Unreal says, I don't think that's right. Okay. Well, why not? What is right? All right. In the adventure, these aspects of life are driven to their extremes. The goal of our actions is no longer organically reached, but is conquered by force. Quote, adventure has the gesture of the conqueror, the quick seizure of opportunity, end quote. This makes it more active, but also more passive, as the seizing is often done suddenly and haphazardly. Quote, in the adventure, we abandon ourselves to the world with fewer defenses and reserves than in any other relation, end quote. We also commit to our goal as if the outcome is certain, but often have to plunge into the uncertain in order to get there. Hence, although much more clearly goal-oriented and structured, there is still some semblance of free-spiritedness in the Simmel's description of adventure related to this recklessness. Unreal says, adventure involves more intense experience, but not by concentration of life, but actually getting out of your everyday context and thus to something that's other than life, at least as you are accustomed to it. I think that's a good criticism. Like, I think that's good because we don't know what concentration of life means, and like appealing to that sort of metaphor, because unless they define it, it's just going to sit as a metaphor. Like, that's kind of like, I think that's right. So it's not necessarily discontinuity due to a concentration of life, but it's some other sort of thing going on here. Okay. Examples of this are the seduction of a potential lover, trying to conquer that person in a moment with little concern for rejection. Another example is outdoor activities, for example, mountain climbing, in which the top of the mountain needs to be conquered while the danger of falling is looming. The uncertainty of acquiring the goal of adventure is something that plays an even larger role in the theories of Sartre and Jankelevich, which we will discuss in the coming sections. In any case, the goal of adventure is much more clearly present in the adventure than it is in everyday life. The goal of adventure is much more clearly present in the adventure than it is in everyday life. I don't understand what this means. Like, of course, the goal of adventure is the point of the adventure. Everyday life has a goal too. Usually is very goal-oriented. Like, why would I go to work unless they were paying me? I wouldn't. I've got other shit to do. But, this is a weird statement. All right. Whether it is work or nurturing relationships with our family and friends, we are much more prone to routine and habit. How is that? Yes, but there's still goal-orientedness there. Not sure what the author is getting at here. We may have a certain goal in mind, but we do not have to be aware of them all the time. Also, these goals tend to be more abstract and achieved in the long term. Hence, they are more often than not intrinsically part of our experience. We can go to our work and do what is asked of us without considering the specific goal we have in mind, and if we do so, those goals are abstract in the sense of it being good for our career or simply that we need to do it in order to get paid. That's what I'm doing. This is all contrary to adventure, in which the goal needs to be seized in the moment. This goes for achieving the goal as well as failing to achieve it. Okay, so it just is a question of proximity of the goal. I mean, that's fair. You've got the goal in adventure is the doing in itself in some sense. Okay. This goal-oriented nature is different from everyday life, but is also an example of what ties adventure and everyday life together. Adventures have the mysterious power to make us feel for a moment the whole sum of life as their fulfillment. They may serve as life lessons precisely because they confront us with the structures of our life in concentrated form. Okay, so now I know what they mean by concentrated. It has nothing to do with concentrated life. It's having to do with the proximity of the goal. The goal has to be the doing of the thing itself. That is what it is. And the fact that you are doing something for that thing in itself at that one time, that is like sort of like summing up the existence at that time. And so that's life concentrated, as opposed to the full life time, which you have long-term goals, but those only get summed up in that whole time. So that's the difference. You've got things that are summed up in themselves at that moment versus things that are summed up over long periods of time. Sock says, I don't think that it is possible if that is what you are meaning, like life is entirely cannot be reduced or constrained because A, it erases naturalism of life, and B, puts all of everyday life into a systematic artificial machine of people manipulating each other's conditions. Yeah, so this is part of the issue, is this treating the everyday life as less meaningful. And I think that's unfair to everyday life. You can have a great everyday life and treat your everyday life as kind of an adventure. That's more of a mindset. But like, there's nothing against that. And I think that's what you're getting at. The systematic artificial machine of people manipulating each other. Yeah, I think that's an unfair. Like, I think this author is treating everyday life a little bit unfairly. And I think that's what you're getting at. And I agree, Sock now. Okay. In his essay on adventure, Simmel gives us all the basic tenets of the phenomenology of adventure we also find in the other thinkers, which we will discuss. The break with everyday life, a consequence of which is that it has much more clear beginning, end, and a much more clearly manifested goal-directed structure. Okay, so so I think the author might be on board with a lot of the criticisms. Their point in putting Simmel first is that Simmel hit a lot of the big ideas. Even if they have got the whole thing wrong, they got a lot of the content right. Frank says, the way you were saying every day makes me wonder. Yes, that's the point. Yes, Frank, I agree. That is the whole point of what does it mean to be every day. Frank says, everyday life can be as meaningful, but you can't learn as much new meaning. I don't know what new is there. You can learn lots of new stuff over the course of your everyday life. Now, if you go on an adventure, you're going to be learning different stuff. Now, what exactly is the difference between new, different, unusual? Like, what's the value terms there? I'm not sure. Pope says, people often define themselves by the story of their life. Yes. And so, but what is that narrative consist of? The story of their life. Is it like defined by some adventures they took and how they related to that? Or is their life determined by some grand narrative over the course of their entire life, where the adventures, may have been parts of that, but like really what they think is important is more their everyday relationships. It's not clear that one is more important than the other. We're just trying to get a hold on what counts as adventure, though. Welcome in, Pope. Sart, adventure as illusion. Frank says, if we look at game skills and how much better you can get at a game you're already expert at or a new game with an hour of play. So, okay, so maybe you're going for like learning curve. Practicing the new game creates more differences in your skill. Yeah, so when you learn a new game, you can like jump in skill level very quickly because you start off at 0 and then you're just like getting infinitely better. But like the incremental getting better at like games, like say you like me, you play Minesweeper, you can get better and better. But like the time difference in like getting a little bit faster when you're an expert is very small compared to the time difference that you can get when you are a newbie and just learning how to play. That's fair. But are you saying that going on an adventure will inherently get you skills that so a bigger difference in and the difference in the choices you make? Now, are you saying that the life skills you get when you're on an adventure are inherently more important then? You may be getting different skills, but like, are they actually more important than the ones you get in your everyday life? Yeah, an acceleration instead of velocity. Exactly. When you learn something new. Yeah, that makes perfect sense, Frank. I see what you're saying. I'm just complaining or saying, look, going on an adventure, does it actually give you the skills you're learning there? how much are they worth actually? They may be completely, you're accelerating at them, but like, are they actually important to your life? Sock now says it undermines the realism of everyday life in your view. Yeah, I see that, Sock now. Yep. Pope says, consider you watching a light turning on and off in the distance. Now consider you watch two lights turn on and off, one after the other. It will appear not as two lights turning on and off, but one light moving back and forth. We often look at the full picture instead of the singular details. Yes, so it depends on, well, I agree. You're going to put a narrative to different things, and it doesn't mean that like that's the way it is in like some sort of fundamental reality. This is how we are defining our lives. That's what's important here. So I agree that like how we define it, but the question is, how do we give value to adventure then if it's really all in retrospect? And I think we're going to get there. Okay, also Frank says the adventure skills are less important, but you improve at them quicker. All right, so maybe this is your theory of adventures and getting yourself to learn new skills, like a new video game. And so even though they're less important to your everyday life, the fact that you get to like quickly get better at them is what is adventurous. Okay, that's a theory. Okay, Sartre, adventure as illusion. We find a very similar description of adventure in Sartre's Nausea. Here the protagonist, Roquentin, muses on his own adventures. His adventures include tales from his travels and his participation in numerous fights. Interestingly, Sartre is rather critical towards the idea of adventure. Ultimately, he thinks that the idea that we can experience genuine adventures is based on an illusion. Pope says, any adventure you go on will most likely lead to being smarter afterwards unless you are killing your brain cells by drinking alcohol or something. Any experience should, lead you to being smarter or better in some way. Now, except for, you go do something stupid, then you're going to do something stupid. The question is adventure better at this for something as opposed to like any everyday life? Now, if you are doing the same shit over and over, will you be learning stuff? No, but does that make you any dumber for it? Maybe, maybe not. Like, you could be getting other benefits out of it. Like, what do you mean by smarter in that case? But, like, I see your points. Like, you seem to be with Frank that you're gaining new skills at something. Sock now says it kind of philosophically angers Sock now in some way because coming from a continental Marxist school of thought, we are and were meant to expose the epochs, not undermine them. Sure, like that theory may not be for you, and it's like the idea that you have to go do something special may be the wrong view of humanity. Like the Marxist view might be that like your life actually does mean more in your like everyday life. So that's your just normal life or whatever that might be. It's like that is entirely on the table. Like there's nothing wrong with that thought. All right, continuing here. Although Sartre never refers to Simmel, his description of adventure is very similar to that of Simmel, however much shorter. He starts with the idea of an adventure having a clear beginning. Adventures have, quote, real beginnings appearing like a fanfare of trumpets, like the first note of a jazz tune, abruptly cutting boredom short, strengthening duration. End quote. Something unexpected happens which gives rise to a feeling of something interesting that is bound to happen. Sartre gives the example of hearing a sound in the shadows or a silhouette crossing the street. Pope says, consider this. You can ask people to rate themselves on certain personality traits, then you can use linear algebra to compare the answers from lots of people and see which traits often overlap. This is a sign that they are smaller parts of one larger encompassing trait. Doing this, they found that traits such as honesty and kindness are smaller parts of the larger trait of conscientiousness, which is the trait of wanting to do what is right. Okay. All right. Continuing. Pope says, doing this, they found some large encompassing traits that everyone should have. One is openness to experience. People who don't like adventure may rate lowly on this trait. The idea that we need to be having certain traits goes with, like, that only works if we have some idea of what counts as, like, the right kind of life or a good life. So I don't like the force of the should there, and I think this is something Sock now is bringing up, is that there's different ideas of what counts as a good life, and so we're going to rate these things differently. Now, of course, you can do statistics on people and say, well, these are the people that seem to be doing the best, these to be doing the happiest, these people are the happiest. That doesn't always correlate to like the underlying, like that maybe circumstances or other stuff. Like you'd have to look at this historically over long periods of time. It's a little bit uncertain. That doesn't make you wrong, Pope. Is just saying it's hard to say like this is how what is exactly the good life. Yeah, so rating loneliness isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just the person's personality. Yeah, but like the question is, what counts as a good life for them versus someone else, and maybe it doesn't matter because like who's to say what counts as the right kind of human experience. Frank says you can call kindness a piece of a larger trait, conscientiousness, or you can call conscientiousness a construction of several traits. Certainly your conscientiousness score isn't enough to completely predict your kindness. Yeah, and that's another problem. Once you start measuring psych things, you can measure them in different ways, and it gets difficult. So you'd have to look at exactly what was done, and that's fair. It's hard. I know it's hard to communicate all these things in Twitch chat. So, but yeah. All right. Yeah. So an adventure. Someone is across the street from you. A silhouette crossing the street. This event is experienced as the quote predecessor of a great form whose outlines are lost in the mist. End quote. Just like the adventure has a clear beginning, it has a clear end. Quote. Something begins in order to end. The adventure doesn't let itself be extended. It achieves significance only through its death. Towards this death, which may also be my own, I am drawn irrevocably. Each moment appears only to bring on the moments after. To each moment I cling with all my heart. I know that it is unique, irreplaceable, and yet I would not lift a finger to prevent it from being annihilated. End quote. Frank says if you want to span personality in just 5 traits, conscientiousness would be a good one, but choosing to stop at 5 is an arbitrary choice. Yeah. I mean, most people know nowadays that the sort of like 5 trait, like the INF whatever, the Myers-Briggs, there's no like, it might be useful for some things, but it's not going to be a like fundamental thing on how everyone, like a fundamental part of like human life. Like it's a way to break things down, but it may not be the best or even that good for many purposes. Might be good for some though. Yeah. Well, Big 5 is way better than Myers-Briggs. Yeah, sure. Exactly, Frank. Pope says facets of openness to experience can refer to openness or non-openness to experiences in each of the 6 realms: fantasy, aesthetics, feelings, action, ideas, values. You see, okay, now if you start breaking it down, we can talk about how you're breaking this down, how this theory works. But like now it's gonna get complicated. This is like a straight up metaphysics at this point. Like what counts as fantasy? Like what does that even mean in this context? So, and why are there 6 realms? Why not 7? Why not 20 realms? Why not 3? So it's like, yeah, I mean, it can make sense. It's just, this is going to be a massive either psychological or philosophical theory that you need to like support this sort of thing, Pope. Okay, yeah, if you're just using it as like an experiment to like get through some ideas, cool. Okay, continuing. Yeah, see, I'm at the 2-hour point and I'm not halfway through this article. Yeah. Sartre plays with the dual meaning of the word end. The end of the adventure is both the realization of its goal, the thing that needs to be conquered, and the termination of the adventure. Hence, achieving the end of the adventure means that the adventure is at an end. The goal-oriented structure and the clear end are 2 sides of the same coin, and Sartre draws them much closer together than Simmel does. Every moment that constitutes the experience of adventure gains its significance in light of this goal. If you are traveling to some place, everything that happens from the moment you leave home brings you closer to that destination. All moments of the journey have significance in reaching your goal. You may have to ask strangers for directions or have to find a place to sleep. Whatever it may be, they are all steps towards the goal. Another example is that of erotic adventures, where every glancing gesture brings you closer to the goal of seducing that person. This idea that all events have significance in light of a specific goal is where the adventure differs from everyday life. Quote, and then all of a sudden something breaks off sharply. The adventure is over. Time resumes its everyday slackness. Yeah, see, again, we've got this time idea going on here. Time resumes its everyday slackness. Here we see the break with everyday life. Sartre emphasizes the phenomenological nature of the change between adventure and everyday life. Because of the strict beginning and ending, we feel that the adventure is suddenly over. This is a sequence of events which may often seem monotonous and devoid of the immediate present kind of meaning of that adventure. Viper says, I thought the real adventure wasn't the destination, but the bullshit we criticized along the way. As always, Vipers. I mean, that's kind of what this is about. What kind of arguments are getting put forward here? And then we bullshit at the end too. But like, yeah. So, I mean, the idea that all your everyday activities take on a different significance. I mean, during adventure, everything you do has a different significance than it does in your like non-adventurous life. That's a theory here. Finding a whole new kind of bullshit to criticize as an adventure. Well, that is philosophy roulette. That is what we do here. This is every Wednesday and Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern. Criticizing the same old bullshit is everyday life. Yes. I went to there's a comparative philosophy workshop or seminar at Columbia University. So I don't normally go there, but I go there every so often, especially if it's on a topic I find interesting. And I was talking to one of the professors of religion that goes to this, because you get religious professors of religion, you get like philosophers of like, you know, like Hindu philosophy, like Japanese philosophy, stuff like that. Like you're getting people who have interest in different areas, and a lot of that stuff is like, you know, you get like Buddhist philosophers, and they're not in philosophy departments, although sometimes they are, but like sometimes they're in like religious studies departments. So I'm over there and I'm talking to this person and they're like, well, why you come? I'm like, well, this is, you know, different for me. He's like, this is different. I'm like, yeah, he's like, this is my same old bullshit. I was like, yes, but this is not my same old bullshit. Your bullshit's like new and exciting to me. And he was like, yeah, I guess so. It was a funny thing. He was like, yeah, this is like I was like, other people's bullshit is like not like, I was like, that's different from my bullshit. So I was like, yeah. Valpo S. So once it's done, we get post-adventure clarity. I think they're going to talk about that later. Yes. I think they said, I don't know if you were here during the introduction, but I think they said that's part of it, that only after the adventure do you actually get to look back on it as an adventure at some point. So I think there is that is a thing, Valpo. But you're right on point. Okay. So when adventure is over, time resumes its everyday slackness. Here we see the break with everyday life. Sartre emphasizes the phenomenological nature of the exchange between adventure and everyday life. Because of the strict beginning and ending, we feel that the adventure is suddenly over. This is a sequence of events which may often seem monotonous and devoid of the immediate present kind of meaning, that of adventure. What the hell was that sentence? I don't know what that sentence was. We do the things that we do out of habit and not because of some kind of plan. This seems very pessimistic of Sartre, but we should keep in mind that the protagonist of the adventure struggles with this apparent meaninglessness of everyday life. We cannot go into the details of existential struggles of the protagonist here, however. For our purposes, it is important to see that adventure has a strict goal-oriented structure, while everyday life seems to only have slackness and is hence devoid of a structure. Yeah, okay, so you're just doing routines blindly in your everyday life. Adventure is not like that. You're doing stuff goal-oriented without routine. This means that the contrast between everyday life and adventure is much bigger for Sartre than for Simmel. For Simmel, adventure shows us the structure of everyday life in a more condensed form. For Sartre, this structure is only present in adventure. Hence, the elements that constitute the experience of adventure are very much present and are even much more interrelated than Simmel suggests. The goal-oriented nature of adventure is not merely one aspect in which the experience differs from everyday life. It is what constitutes the break and also the sudden beginning and ending. Okay, yeah, because everyday life for the existentialist, or at least the Sartrean existentialist, is all mindless routine. The fact that all of a sudden the adventure has a beginning, a goal, and an end makes it radically different. Fair enough. I don't know if it's true to the philosophies, but like I understand the argument this author is making. It's like it makes enough sense at least. Okay. Author says, thus, while we may associate adventure with free-spiritedness and everyday life with strictness, the opposite is the case for Sartre. Still, because of the significance of every moment, adventure is very much an example of living in the moment, something we ordinarily associate with the term. Although Sartre gives us this description of what an adventure constitutes, the protagonist thinks that although it may seem that he experienced an adventure, adventure ultimately amounts to an illusion. It only seems as if episodes of our life have this goal-oriented structure. This has to do with the way we narrate our lives. And this is like, I think what Pope was saying, or I think Pope brought up, that there is a narrative, and this sort of is an issue with all of this, how we talk about ourselves. Quote, for the most commonplace event to become an adventure, you must, and this is all that it is necessary, start recounting it. This is what fools people. A man is always a teller of tales. He lives surrounded by his stories and the stories of others. He sees everything that happens to him through them, and he tries to live his life as if he were recounting it. But you have to choose, to live or to recount. End quote. Yeah, so I was in a bar, like an Irish pub here in the city. I think they had a sign on the wall. It says beer because no great story began with I was eating a salad. So it's like, yeah, that is fascinating. Okay. Which part, Frank? But like, you don't have to tell me. But I appreciate you liking it. Old man is heading off to sleep. Feel free to add a brain dance for Brian if you like. Okay, will do. Thank you, Unreal, for hanging out. Frank, the adventure is experience that you repackage for others' consumption. Yeah, I mean, this is a thread in continental 20th century philosophy because you'll get this also in the Baudrillard. But absolutely, the repackaging is a whole thing in this area of philosophy. Sockdown says when you materially analyze this, it kind of gives certain permissions for this monolithic idea that socialization in the sense of communicable events means humans systematically have the right to control psychological consciousness instead of scientifically recording life via exegesis and find a solution to the issues of the current point of time in question. We should have the right to force life entirely artificially and over the top of the period, i.e. epic by the common individual attacking each other. I mean, I don't know about attacking each other, but yeah, this is basically this repackaging of life in a way that makes it exciting and sort of like interesting and existentially of having existential import. Yeah, that's like definitely where a lot of this continental philosophy went, especially in the Baudrillard later on. This is what I know. It's the idea that you can only explain what a thing really means in the recounting of it. So yeah. Pope says alcohol kills your brain cells. All keeps my brain cells. You'll keep all your brain cells. Thank you. Well, that's awesome, Pope. Pope says also common sense would tell us we'd enjoy ourselves more if we weren't giving ourselves brain damage. Well, yes, but there are things you do that you might think open up, like you loosen you up sometimes. You don't have to drink alcohol. You might do something else. Like, there's lots of things. You don't need alcohol to do this. Like, the point of the alcohol was that how do you start a story? It's that you don't start a story with salad. You start a story with, like, something crazy happened. Faraday, what's up? Great. Hey, Maddie, how you doing? We're out to Barry your day. Hey, Verdurden, how you doing? Yeah, so what's up, Faraday? If anyone doesn't know Faraday, we're doing some continental shit today, Faraday. We are doing phenomenology. We're doing the phenomenology of adventure. What's going on, dude? How's your story? I mean, your stream. Anyone who doesn't know me, hi, I'm Noah. Nogre. You can call me whatever. Just be nice about it. I'm a philosopher. Usually doing analytic stuff, but I am promiscuous in my philosophy. We're talking some phenomenology today. Yeah, you just finished Gazopa's day book. Nice. About time, too. Been doing that for a bit. I bet many stories have started with salad. Yes, but how many stories, Pope, start off with I was eating a salad and then? Like, the salad isn't the interesting part. That's the point I was making. Not that, like, salad's bad. I eat salad all the time. I like salad. But, like, no one starts a story with, I was eating a salad. Like, it's not a good start to a story. That's what's more important here. Yeah, what's up? Barrett, yo, sounds sick. Stream was good. Finished reading book on Opus Day. Kind of scary. Yeah. Whole thing on stream, 400. Yeah, he's been doing that for a bit. Yeah. So if anyone doesn't know, Barrett, he's a continental philosopher working on charisma, the idea, like the thought of charisma. So, like, what goes into it? I'm sure there's a phenomenology of charisma, too. We should talk about that one day, Barrett. But, like, yeah, so you want some more philosophy content, you can hang over there. He's an Aussie, so he's on at different times of day than I am. But, like, yeah, charism, yes. Oh, yeah, charism. Yeah, get that charism. That's what the kids are all after, the charism. Pope says, I think it's a good start to story. You have to have a reference point to jump off from. The style not being the most interesting thing even plays a good part, as it makes the actual action of the story seem more interesting in comparison. Yes, but you see, it's only in comparison to the other stuff. It's like, I'm not advocating for being an alcoholic or drinking beer here. I'm advocating for being able to write a good story. And it's like, but that is the whole point of what Sartre is saying here. It's that, are we going to have a narrative view of our lives, or are we going to live our lives? If we're going for the narrative view of our lives, yeah, then we could say, then how are we looking at our narrative? Is it in terms of, like, the exciting things that we do, or are we going, like, but that's like bullshit to him. That's the point here, is that, like, if we're just crafting stories, we're not living our life. That's the argument from the existentialist. So it's like, yeah, I'm not advocating for the beer, but it's just like, how do you craft these stories, and why do you craft them in these ways is the philosophical question. Pope says, I was at a corner restaurant eating salad when I saw an interesting fellow crossing the street. He stopped in the middle of the street to pick up some boxes he dropped and then continued in your direction. Okay, but, like, that's not a very interesting story. I'm sorry. I know you're doing this, like, off the cuff to make a point, but, like, that's the whole point. You could have been drinking beer, you could have been eating salad, but, like, the whole point is, what's valuable there existentially. Sock now says, I would phrase the word attack, kind of draw on the manipulating consciousness can be exploitative when we go back to concentrating of everyday life. One's life is negative, then concentrating would mean increasing that negativity on themselves. Yeah, so the idea of, like, an adventure, if it's a shitty adventure, then you don't want that thing. Like, there's lots of shitty things in our lives, and you could actually describe them as a kind of adventure, and we don't do that. And I think you've got a good point. We normally don't describe shitty things as an adventure. Certain things are very exciting, and exciting for all the wrong reasons. And it's like, that could be described as an adventure, and we don't do that. So I think you're right. Maddie says, what's the salad mean existential? Yeah, but this is the existentialist's point. Why are we trying to describe our lives? Why are we not trying to live our lives? Verdurden says, I was sitting at my desk eating salad and joined a group video chat on Discord when everyone felt the need to defend that they weren't eating salad when I didn't even bring it up. Yes. Pope says, the salad sums up the prelude to the story, a series of events that lead you to the corner restaurant in order to eat the salad. Having that information for the reader gives you a lot more information than I was at a restaurant. Yeah. Fair. But, like, yeah, Pope, you're trying to talk story composition. You guys are talking about philosophy, and so we aren't communicating. No, I know exactly, but that's the whole point, is that if you're talking story composition, that's fair. But we're talking philosophy. What I'm trying to describe is what's going on in the paper. So it's like, yeah. Frank says, I would choose dying over having an adventure. Why anything could be happening on an adventure, you might die. Yes. But, like, yeah. I mean, depends, like, you know, not everyone likes surprises. Adventure involves surprises. But, like, yes. Of course, story composition only matters to, like, someone who's good at writing stories. If you're no good at writing, then you don't understand anything about story composition. It doesn't matter. But, like, the idea is that if you're going to be making a story that sounds like an adventure, it's like, yeah, then you have to have, like, interesting things that happen. And, of course, a salad could be part of that. All right, let's get back to reading for a bit. The goal-oriented structure of adventure is imposed upon the events of our life in hindsight when we recount them. Once we know that the goal is achieved, we recount the events in such a way that they have significance in light of that goal. We may, for example, omit details from the story that do not relate to the goal. This goal is the climax of the story to which everything leads. However, we must know the outcome of the story before we can tell it in such a way that it conforms to the idea of adventure. As we do not know where our life is heading and whether we will succeed in achieving our goals, we cannot experience adventure in the strict sense of the term. Frank says, you have to be having salad for the adventure to start. See, that would be a very odd thing, but it could be the case. But you can see right here is where they say you get to omit details that do not relate to the overall adventure. So does the beer matter for the adventure, or does the salad matter for the adventure? How do you actually build that narrative? It's like, yes. Frank says, I think story composition is very relevant since adventure is all in the mind. What story are you telling yourself about yourself? I think you're 100% in agreement with Sartre here. That like this is, or the author here, this is exactly what matters. When you want to consider an adventure, you are building that story about yourself. Okay. This theme of adventure is not being the structure of events, but instead a narrative about those events is related to the idea of narrative identity. Yep. So the chat's already there. But this is also a good sign of like this writer that everyone is kind of going in the direction that the writer had set out. They knew what they were doing. This happens every so often in philosophy. People start getting these ideas, but it's the ideas are where the author wants us to go because they have set it up that way. This is someone who knows how to set up a story or a philosophical narrative for that matter. This is the idea nowadays widespread amongst philosophers that selfhood is something we create by telling stories about ourselves and others. By telling stories, we do not simply narrate what happened, but add structure and significance to our life's events. Paul Ricoeur, for example, calls this emplotment, the idea that by telling a story we create rather than explicate a plot. This transforms the succession of events into one meaningful whole, which makes the story followable. He adds that thanks to this, the entire plot can be translated into one thought, and that plot imposes the sense of an ending. This is very much in line with Sartre's ideas concerning adventure. Adventure is a narrative device centering events around a single goal, which is also its end. Sartre also relates the theme of adventure to entire life stories in his war diaries when he calls the idea that life is a big adventure leading to some kind of climax the biographical illusion. This is the idea that our entire life is centered around a single calling, such as in Sartre's case being a famous writer. Like adventure, this idea leads to frustration because it does not do justice to the contingencies of life. Yeah, so this is why, I mean, it's sort of an imposition. It's not, the adventure isn't actually, when you try to narrate it, you're imposing the grand structure more than it was inherently there. So that makes some sense too. We are doing more work to like make a unified story than actually exists in anyone's life. Okay. Even if we do not follow the idea that a life story has a single plot, it still makes sense to stress the significance of adventures in the context of stories. Oh, and Barry, thank you again for the raid. If you had to raid and run, had to go get food, feel free to disappear. But if you're still here, cool too. Alright. When we tell stories about our lives, it makes sense to focus on events that hold significance. Thank you, Pope, for the follow. When we tell stories about our lives, it makes sense to focus on the events that hold significance and therefore to tell about our adventures rather than about everyday life. This aligns nicely with the popularity of adventures narratives in media. Their popularity can also be attributed to the fact that they present us with characters whose lives are filled with significance. Frank says, obviously, nigh infinite events happened, but the storyteller picks out the ones that matter. Yeah. Yep. But see, I think that's relating more and more into Sartre, that you are crafting this. And so the adventure is more of a creation than something that, happened. Whatever for some like reality is. I mean, there is no fixed reality. Sock now says, to give this popular reason, quote, I want off this roller coaster. People would say this is in relationship with the idea that I hate this adventure. I don't want to participate in this adventure. I want to leave this point in my life and start life again. When you say why not stop studying your life or recording your life and live your life, kind of ignores the conditions that people in negative adventures live. Yeah, the point is to change our reality, but not to ignorantly accelerate negative realisms. Yeah, that's a nice saying, because it does identify the sort of negative adventures. We don't call them negative adventures, but like maybe that should be a term, because like when you say we want off this roller coaster, that's entirely what's going on, like, you know, all the time, you know, at the moment. A lot of weird things happening in the world that people are not expecting, and it's not like, and it is a kind of adventure that's shitty. So yeah, it's fair. You want to get back to what you were working on. So, yes, I think you hit it there. Frank says, you are crafting the story, but it's not by the conscious you. It's by the things your brain has attention on, the things that finds aboutness in. I mean, that's fair, but like, are we denying all agency here? Do you have no input on that? I mean, that's fair. You're just sort of letting your mind define whatever adventure is for you at that moment, whatever your mind is deciding it to be, or you are also trying to craft a narrative if you are giving yourself any agency. I mean, that seems, I agree with that, but I mean, I guess where's the agency there? Like, is there any, is there not any? It's like, okay, you're just going to rephrase that differently depending on where you are on the free will question, I guess. But like, yes, Frank, I agree. Okay, where were we? By stressing the narrative dimension of adventure, Sartre shows us an important characteristic of the experience of adventure that Simmel does not address in much detail, namely that adventure changes in hindsight. Yeah, and so this is the post-adventure clarity that Valpo picked up on. Although Simmel does say that the significance of all events may change in hindsight because of their meaning in light of life as a whole, he does not relate this to adventure specifically. Simmel does say, however, that an adventure becomes dreamlike in our memory because of its contrast with everyday life, but he does not attribute much significance to this aspect. Later in the article, we will see that Yankelevich also sees this as a main feature of the experience of adventure. Okay, so we'll be getting back to this later too, which is interesting. So like the reflection on it matters a lot. Although adventures only exist in hindsight and can therefore not properly take place in the present, there is an important remark that must be made when it comes to experiencing adventure. This has to do with the fact that experiencing the illusion of adventure is something that is actually possible. We can compare this to an optical illusion. One could think of well-known ones in which motionless circles appear to be moving. When one covers half the circle with our hand, we see that it is an optical illusion. Yet, if we remove our hand, we once again see the circles moving. Knowing that it is illusory does not remove the illusion. The same goes for adventure. That's fair, because even in, like, if you're going on a trip, you're going on stuff, there's going to be the everyday banalities. You're still gonna have to wake up and like brush your teeth or whatever, and like doing that sort of thing is the same as if you were not on an adventure. So you can sort of like still stop and take a breath when you're on an adventure. So it's like you can, but then get back to it immediately. All right. Author continues, even after realizing that adventures cannot truly happen, the protagonist is still struck by the feeling of adventure. While walking on the streets outside, he is struck by the feeling that something is going to happen. He experiences this as a break with everyday life, saying that nothing has changed and yet everything exists in a different way. Suddenly he sees omens and clues in the world around him, being drawn to seemingly random objects and places. Suddenly everything seems meaningful, drawing him closer to some kind of goal that is waiting for him. At the end of his journey, which consists of nothing more than passing a few empty streets, he sees a smiling woman through the window of a cafe. What's up, Caudillo? How are you? Yeah, we're talking adventure today. I feel like I'm in Shane's stream. Okay. After seeing her, the feeling of adventure fades again. Although it seems that he achieved the goal of his adventure, the only thing he achieved was the fantasy of growing old with this woman. The feeling of adventure makes makes us think that our life is leading up to something, but that does not mean that is actually the case. Once the feeling fades and life returns to its everyday slackness, the protagonist feels empty. However, in these brief episodes, everything in his life seems meaningful, and that is something that makes him very happy. Hence, he covets this illusion. Quote, "Perhaps there is nothing in the world I value more than this feeling of adventure." I'm fine. How are you? And man, and you? Oh, I love adventure. Sorry you're late. Don't be sorry you're late. I always tell people, someone was actually mentioning to me that like they don't feel like they have anything to say in chat. I said, never feel bad if you're late. Never feel if you have nothing to say. Feel free to just spam emotes. Like that's cool too. Just like saying hi is great. So yeah, I'm okay at the moment. Just on my grind, doing my thing, reading my philosophy, and I was pretty happy to see this paper on the phenomenology of adventure. I have a soft spot for talking about topics in philosophy that don't normally get covered. I have a soft spot for phenomenology, so I'm enjoying this paper. It's like pretty well written. There's been a few like a little bit off and on the arguments here, but like I don't feel like that's necessarily the author's fault. They're presenting a few different views on adventure, and maybe maybe the people they're discussing have had some soft spots in their philosophy, but like it doesn't really matter. Overall, like I think this has been pretty good. So far, so good, at least I should say. Well, I'm only about halfway through. Sockno says, this sounds like transcendentalism inserted into a continentalism now, rather than continentalism. The continental ideas that sound like Ralph Waldo Emerson for a sec. Maybe Sock now. Like I'm not entirely sure what's going on in like all those philosophies, but like yeah, there's different things happening all at once in these things. You're upset you're late to this? Well, as always, the VOD will be up on YouTube soon enough. Yeah. But like yeah, the VOD will exist on Twitch. The highlight will exist for a little bit longer on Twitch, maybe not. Like yeah, sorry. There's the technicalities that of streaming on Twitch that keep shifting. So, anyway. Thus, when it comes to the phenomenology of adventure, Sartre's theory is a double-edged sword. On the one hand, he states that adventure cannot exist in real life because the goal-oriented structure is something we can only impose upon our life by recounting it in hindsight. We can never live our life truly as an adventure because we do not know whether we will achieve our goals and what significance every moment is in light of these goals. However, we can still experience the illusion of adventure. We do experience the break with everyday life. It does seem in that moment that everything that happens to us is leading up to some kind of goal. That does not mean that we will actually achieve said goal. This may lead to frustration once the feeling of adventure fades, as we are confronted with the fact that life is not as meaningful as adventure stories seem to suggest. In these stories, the hero always succeeds in achieving his goal of defeating a villain and saving the world. In the end, Sartre's assessment of adventure is much more negative than simple. There is no grand meaning in the form of a life lesson that can be achieved through adventure. There's only an illusion that confronts us with the fact that life is not as meaningful as adventure suggests. Po1 is doing an event. Did I know? Really? No. I did not know, but I have been, I was telling people earlier, Friday was the first day I had like a moment to breathe. I went to a local restaurant where a buddy of mine works, and like they treated me really nice. I got a few comped drinks. I had like a good meal. Like I had a few hours and I went and got like good food, and like that was really nice. And I was like super happy on Friday. And then Saturday I was all depressed. I was like back to the grind. That wasn't an adventure, but like kind of is exactly in this what I'm talking about here. Like I didn't get to play like Path of Exile, which I'd like to do, but I did go and have like people be real nice to me and treat me nice, and then I had to like come back and be like, oh, I have to go do all this fucking work on Twitch to get all my VODs like highlights fixed. So I was like, yeah. Whoever said that part is wrong, Sartre or whatever, entirely possible. I mean, you don't have to agree with Sartre that the like fake feeling of meaningfulness is what actually is an adventure. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what he's saying, that you get this sort of this grand narrative or a feeling of it, but it never actually manifests in life. Okay, de Beauvoir, Adventure as Conquest. The emphasis on the goal-oriented nature is also what drives de Beauvoir's description of adventurers. As said, she is not concerned with the phenomenology of adventure per se, yet her descriptions are interesting in light of our inquiry. We already saw that Simmel compares the adventurer to the conqueror, and this is also the cornerstone of de Beauvoir's ideas concerning the matter. One of these days I will play with you. It's just... the number of things that I am trying to get done keeps stacking up, and video games, although they are fun and a good time, are just like have been hard to fit in, and I do feel bad about that. I need to make more times for recreation for me. I'm just doing too much work. Okay. Anyway, in The Ethics of Ambiguity, de Beauvoir is concerned with finding an ethics that is neither essentialist nor nihilist. An essentialist ethics is the idea that ethical principles, in this case especially those that concern how we should treat other people, are set in stone somehow. They are true regardless of the lives of the persons that should live accordingly. The opposite of essentialism is nihilism, namely the idea that there are no ethical principles and we should not be concerned with other people and can do as we please. Kadu says, "You're slaying enough gods for the both of us." I appreciate that. The opposite of essentialism, the goal for de Beauvoir is to find an existentialist ethics that is neither essentialist nor nihilist. In other words, this boils down to the question of how and why we should still take others into concern in our endeavors if there are no universal ethical principles and we are free to determine our own life's path. We would stray too far off topic to go into the details of this existentialist ethics, however. What is important to us, or important for us, is that she discusses various ethical stances towards other people, which do steer from the two extremes of essentialism and nihilism, but which nonetheless fall short of how they see other people. The first is the adventurer. According to de Beauvoir, the adventurer shares the nihilist's contempt for men. This moral attitude is only slightly different from full-blown nihilism, where the nihilist can become lethargic in light of the idea that there are no moral values. The adventurer does not let the absence of morals get in the way of living his life. Quote, "Hoping for no justification, he will nevertheless take delight in living. He will not turn aside from the things which he does not believe in. He will seek a pretext in them for a gratuitous display of activity. Such a man is what is generally called an adventurer. He throws himself into his undertakings with zest, into exploration, conquest, war, speculation, love, politics, but he does not attach himself to the end at which he aims, only to his conquest. He likes action for its own sake. He finds joy in spreading through the world a freedom which remains indifferent to its content." End quote. De Beauvoir also stresses the goal-oriented nature of adventure. An adventurer is someone who is always in pursuit of some goal, yet cares little about the thing he is aiming at. He is indifferent about these things, however, and only in it for the pursuit itself. Quote, "Whether he succeeds or fails, he goes right ahead, throwing himself into new enterprise to which he will give himself, and with the same indifferent ardor." End quote. The goal does not justify the adventure, as this would imply some kind of morality. The adventure justifies the goal. Sakna says she is brilliant. Yeah. De Beauvoir is brilliant. Yeah. The most problematic aspect of the adventurer is that he meets other people in his endeavors and has little regard for them. The quintessential example of the adventurer is that of the literal conqueror who conquers land where other people live. Quote, "The man we call an adventurer, on the contrary, is one who remains indifferent to the content, that is, to the human meaning of his action, who thinks he can assert his own existence without taking into account that of others." End quote. This is why de Beauvoir condemns the adventurer's mode of looking at the world. It excludes a morality in which we take the needs and freedoms of others into account because of its conquest-driven character. Although literal conquest is an extreme example, we can find a more moderate one in many forms of modern tourism, in which native people are treated as entertainment for the tourist. The tourist has a goal in mind, whether it is relaxation, changing his or her, or perhaps finding oneself. The destination that is traveled can be regarded as simply a backdrop for attaining this goal. Hence, de Beauvoir's theories about how others relate to the goal of the adventure are very broadly applicable. You know, that's fair. a lot of people will be like, oh, you hear, and I've heard Aris criticize this too, and I think he's right. You hear like, rich kids be like, oh, I love travel. People like they go travel, and it's like because they have money and they don't have like work that like they don't have to pay for things because like their parents are going to pay for it, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just the blasé attitude, like that the world is there to entertain them. Well, I mean they're young and you can't really criticize too much, but the idea that like the world is there as their entertainment, it's like, well, yeah, the rest of us are out here working, and it's like, well, we're supporting your entertainment. Like, all right, fine, but like, what's going on with that? And it's like, and this person sort of goes like having their own adventures because they can, but like the rest of us are working. Stockton says, love her book, The Second Sex. Love that it was entered in here. Yeah, this is like very smart. Again, I don't mean to be overly praising this author, but I think they've done a very good job finding interesting different angles on the adventure topic. So yeah, like this is cool though. You adventure for the adventure's sake, which is what other people say, but the idea that you lose morality is what de Beauvoir is adding here. It's like, it's important. Okay. Author continues, we can also think about erotic conquest in this regard, especially by someone who is only interested in the act of love and not in the feelings or desires of the person he aims to conquer. This brings us to the gendered nature of the erotic conquest. Women are traditionally regarded as the goal of the adventurer, as what needs to be conquered, rather than being seen as adventurers themselves. This is stressed by de Beauvoir in The Second Sex, a book which the passive position of women as opposed to the more active men is critically studied. There she says, quote, women is a special prize which the hero, the adventurer, and the rugged individualist are destined to win, end quote. Simmel also stresses this idea of the masculinity of the erotic adventurer, although much less critically than de Beauvoir does. Quote, as a rule, a love affair is an adventure only for men. For women, it usually falls into other categories, end quote. This theme of conquest shows an important negative feature of adventures. If the goal-driven structure of adventure is extended to other people, they become mere objects that only have meaning in light of another person's adventure. This is especially problematic if we consider the idea raised by de Beauvoir that some people have more access than others to becoming the adventurer in light of our cultural conceptions of adventurers. Practically, it means that Western people have more access to adventure than non-Western people, and men have more access to it than women. In terms of gender and social roles, some people may be in a position where going on adventure is more socially acceptable than it is for others. This also raises the question of socioeconomic status. While the structure of adventure experience can in principle be experienced by everyone, being able to break away from the structure of everyday life or partaking in adventurous activities is something that is simply more affordable for some than for others. Yeah, so everyone knew what I was going to say, and they said it. So this is what I was saying also. When the author, like when I start thinking of things and the author has anticipated all this stuff, it's because they've set up their argument in a way that makes like not logical sense, but like narrative. It has a good narrative sense to it. And so you're like following along with what's going on. Sockno says, exactly. People have social permissions that are tied with their economic factor. Yeah, 100%. So you can have the economic criticism of adventure here too. And that's part of what's getting pulled in. And maybe a Marxist analysis. Okay. Proletariat does not get to adventure as much as the bourgeois people do. They have less access to it. Hence, the structure of the experience of adventure itself also reveals the negative societal impact that a desire for an adventurous life can have. Sartre already showed how the lust for adventure can have negative impact upon oneself when it leads to the frustration and hopelessness. De Beauvoir supplements this point by pointing out that the desire for adventure can affect other people negatively by making one subservient to another person's meaningful experiences while not necessarily gaining anything from this themselves. Viper's comments, surely the sexual dimorphism of adventure is simply because sex is a mountain to climb for men and not so for women. Yes, I think that is an accurate statement, Vipers. I mean, there are many mountains we wish to climb in sex. You know, hills and round things and other knolls. So, yeah. There is the question also of, I mean, taking that overly seriously. Like, does the testosterone just make men go out and do stupid things as opposed to women? I don't know. I mean, men are, I mean, and this is a gross generalization, but men are just, bigger and stronger on average, and they go out and they can, like, go beat things up easier on average. So it's like, is there a physical aspect to the typical kinds of adventures because of the sort of narrative written by men adventures are going to be sort of conducive to things that men do because they have just been the ones writing more about this. So, like, how is our concept of adventure colored by the sort of adventures men have had because they're the ones that have just had more opportunity to do so. So, yeah, there's definitely there's like something to that. All right. In light of the emphasis on the goal-directed structure of adventure, de Beauvoir's theory is very much in line with that of Simmel, and perhaps more so with that of Sartre. Well, Beauvoir and Sartre were a thing, so I'm not surprised they kind of agree. What time is it? Yeah, 2:43. My brain is starting to go. I can feel it. And I'm only mostly through this, but not towards the end yet. Have to try not to lose my mind here. What Sartre says about moments is applied by de Beauvoir to people. As we have discussed, according to Sartre, the moments that constitute an adventure all have meaning in light of the goal of an adventure. De Beauvoir extends his reasoning to the people we encounter during our adventures. We do not take them fully for human beings, but only see them as a means to an end. Hence, de Beauvoir considers adventuring in this sense immoral and akin to nihilism. Thereby, she emphasizes the amorality of an adventurous lifestyle. Although de Beauvoir talks about this moral attitude of the adventurer, we can easily read her description as one concerning the phenomenology of adventure, especially considering the similarities with Simmel's and Sartre's theories. She stresses the element of conquest, the goal-oriented nature of adventure, and places it at the forefront of her analysis. Furthermore, just like Sartre, she stresses the holistic meaning of adventure, where everything and everyone that is encountered only has meaning in light of the goal of the adventure. She does not address the contrast with everyday life because she is more concerned with people who have an adventurous lifestyle and not the adventure as a mode of experience that everyone may have. The difference between adventure in itself and an adventurous lifestyle is also briefly addressed by Simmel, who says that the professional adventurer makes a system of life out of his life's lack of system. He also states that this lifestyle makes macroscopically visible that which is the essential form of every adventure, that even that of the non-adventurous person. End quote. This gives us all the more reason to see de Beauvoir's theory not only as one of morality, but also one considering the phenomenology of adventure. Yeah, so I mean, you can say that like you're morally treating people as like a means to your adventurous end, but also that this is how you are actually viewing them. You are experiencing them as a means to the end, and that's the shitty part of the moral, is that you are just treating them that way. That's how you're experiencing them, and not giving them their due course as full humans. Okay, yeah, I am definitely starting to drop off and brain anything at this point. All right, but let's see, where are we? We were on page 12. I have to get to page 17. So we've got 5 more pages. So let's try and get through it reasonably quick. But what brain doing the good? Like, you don't understand. The way I philosophy roulette is I am reading the paper kind of on autopilot and like listening to myself and thinking about it while I'm reading. And it's like, this all starts to collapse. It gets harder and harder to do. All right. So, Yankelevich, adventure as anticipation. Sakno says, de Beauvoir talks not only about how women were treated in their time, but she also talks about today's inequalities towards adventure. She pushes more this idea that social minorities, financial minorities, and we have the unfortunate and the unfortunate that is tied to either. And she is pushing the idea that self-actualization in a psychological sense is trying to push social positivism and home economic integrations on a practical level. Yeah, so it's like there's definitely this economic thing where if you're a minority or just poor, you don't get to do these sort of like bougie things like adventure or, have time to self-actualize. You have to go work. So it's a very different sort of what exactly is the goal of society? Like this is negative view of adventure, where a lot of people think, oh, it's fun to go places and see things. Well, exactly what is the practicalities of that? I hope I got your comment right. I'm not sure, Sock, now. But, clarify, just let me know. All right. Let us turn to the last theory on adventure, that of Yankelevich, as he develops it in Adventure, Boredom, Seriousness. Thank you. Thank you, Sock, now. He is the only one that explicitly draws from Simmel's theory, yet not that of Sartre or de Beauvoir. According to Yankelevich, adventure is a way in which we experience time, which he, as the title of his book suggests, contrasts with the other two ways to do so. These are seriousness and boredom. This suggests that the same contrast with everyday life we have discussed, but Yankelevich discerns two ways of experiencing time that plays a role in everyday life. Kaldir says, man, modern society is such a bummer. Not really, because it sounds like de Beauvoir is shitting on adventure, and so is Sartre. But this also means that, you can do smaller scale adventures in your everyday life. If you were treating this like the bougie, I'm gonna go do a world tour with all this money and treat the world as my entertainment. That's thank you, Sock. I appreciate that. It's but that doesn't mean that the adventure should be treated. It's not that we can't go on adventures. Is that we just have to realize that this aspect of our reality can be understood differently. It doesn't have to be a bummer here. Okay. In boredom, we experience a perpetual present. Because there is nothing meaningful that takes up our time, we are left waiting for something to happen. However, when this deliverance from the meaningless present does not come soon enough, we anticipate the future in vain and hence are trapped at the present. In seriousness, we do not experience time per se, but aim to place ourselves outside of the flow of time by planning and scheduling and hence doing everything at the designated time. Hence, we do not need to relate to time anymore, as we have scheduled everything neatly and know when we need to do what. Okay, so when we're bored, we're just stuck waiting for stuff to happen, and when we're overly serious, we're basically we're helicoptering. We got helicopter parents. We're being forced to do X, Y, Z on a schedule, and so we no longer have to think about time anymore. Seriousness and boredom embody two aspects of everyday life, namely the idea that nothing exciting happens and the routine and structure. Yankelevich says that adventure is an enchanting oasis in the formless desert of boredom, and that once the adventure ends, life becomes serious again, and we return to the formless prose of everyday life. Okay. The formless desert of boredom. Although seriousness has to do with structuring life, we actually externalize this structure by scheduling, and therefore we do not need to experience it anymore. Hence, structuredness and formlessness are two sides of the same coin and are both part of everyday life. They both oppose the exciting and free-spirited nature of adventure. All right, and so here's what we're doing, Caudio. This is sort of a more contemporary thing where all the boring shit and all the scheduled shit are the things we're getting away from, and here's how to break out of it. So now we're getting to the solution that adventure is giving us to the silliness of life. How then does adventure relate to our experience of time? Quote, what is experienced and passionately hoped for in the adventure is the emergence of the future, end quote. Yankelevich states, in order to see what this entails, Yankelevich first turns towards the smallest possible adventure. This is a certain way of experiencing a single instant that we do not ordinarily call an adventure, but nevertheless serves as the building block for one. This is the anticipation of the future in the present, the overwhelming feeling that something is about to happen. Like Simil, Yankelevich stresses the fact that adventure embodies both certainty and uncertainty. This ambiguity is the most fundamental aspect of adventure. The future is ambiguous because we do not know that it will happen, but we do not know what because we do know that it will happen, but we do not know what is going to happen. We know for certain that there will be a moment after this one, however, we are uncertain about what is going to happen. Even if we are able to predict what will happen, we still do not know the significance of the way it will happen. The smallest possible adventure is hence the confrontation with the ambiguity of the future as lived in the present moment. Okay, this is a Heideggerian take on Nietzsche's eternal return, where the future is unknowable, the past is the future is opaque, the past is infinitely complex, and so we have to always be returning to this like sort of moment where we don't know what is coming, but we know it's coming, and we don't know how to process the past because it's infinitely complex. So, but it's coming. So this is what's it called? This is an adventure theory of the eternal return. A proper adventure is a series of such moments stringed together, each moment anticipating the next. As we continually have the idea that something is about to happen, Yankelevich stresses that adventure, quote, is a beginning that does not stop beginning, end quote. We see the same emphasis on the beginning that we also saw in Simmel's and Sartre's theories. Furthermore, we see the emphasis on the idea that all events in an adventure have meaning with regard to each other that Sartre also stresses. For Yankelevich, however, it is a perpetual beginning that determines this chain of events rather than all of them being drawn to the same end, as Sartre says. Yet we must keep in mind that this beginning is related to the anticipation of the future and therefore still aimed at the thing that is about to happen. Therefore, it does have a goal-oriented structure. Sakna says, Yankelevich is saying something that I like hearing in a different sense. The anticipation of production, like production, would be that push for capital, that push for more economic freedom of capital, business owners, and how we want to see time can drag that we need to be always ready for money, customers, for networking. I see. Okay, so it's sort of like this capitalistic, always be ready to be selling, always be ready to be engaging with people. And so you make a narrative to the always being ready for a new thing. Okay. All right. According to Yankelevich, there are three basic forms of proper adventures. Quote, the deadly adventure, the aesthetic adventure, and the love adventure. Just like the minute adventure one has with the ambiguity between certain and the uncertain, these proper adventures all have to do with what Yankelevich calls the oscillation between playfulness and seriousness. It is the tension between the two extremes that characterizes adventures. Without this tension, the adventure ceases. This says ceases here to be. I thought it was going to seize up or something. Ceases to be. Yeah, this is either translated or chat GPT'd from another language. Mostly this paper has been good and well written, but like there's been dropped words and like this is the wrong word. It's CEASES, not SEIZES. So there's a little weirdness in this paper here. In like the editing, I should say. Okay, if it were only playful without any stakes, it would be devoid of its anticipatory nature and would perish into pure boredom. Yet if we remove the playfulness altogether, the adventure becomes too serious and can no longer be considered a break with everyday life. In other words, there needs to be something at stake, but not too much for an adventure to truly feel adventurous. Yeah, so when you're going to wager, the wagering amount of money you're wagering can't be too small, because like if you're only wagering like parts of a penny, then you don't care. Like you can wager as much as you want because you're not going to lose any significant amount. On the other hand, it can't be everything you own because then you're going to be just like nerve wracking. Like the whole point of like having something at stake is that like it's something meaningful to you, but it's not going to ruin you. Like if you're doing something that's going to ruin you, that's a serious issue. Okay, and it can't be too small either, because then it doesn't matter. And this is part of my problem with philosophies that use money, because, yeah, that's a different problem. All right. The three basic forms all have to do with a certain relation of the playful and serious element of adventure. In the first one, the deadly adventure, seriousness trumps playfulness. Once again, Yankelevich emphasizes a contrast. In this case, the one who experiences the adventure needs to freely start the adventure, but also needs to fully let himself be engulfed and therefore led by it. The example he gives is someone that is going to climb the Himalayas. Although the seriousness of everyday life requires him to do all kinds of things, such as paying taxes, nothing requires him to go mountain climbing. Hence, he decides so for himself. However, once he has thrown himself into his endeavor, he loses this autonomy and is subject to the elements. Caught in a snowstorm, he is no longer in charge. The adventure starts as a break with the seriousness of everyday life, but in the face of death, life becomes precisely what is at stake. In light of death, adventure becomes too serious and ceases to be adventure. The deadly adventure, therefore, plays with the possibility of true danger, but loses its adventurous spirit once things get too dangerous. This possibility of death is related to the basic feature of adventure, the ambiguity between the certain and the uncertain. Just like with the future, we know death will happen, but we do not know how and when exactly it will. Thereby, adventure reveals to us something about life, namely that it will end one day. In the second basic form of adventure, playfulness trumps seriousness. The aesthetic adventure is the adventure as it is experienced in hindsight. Once the adventure is over, we can tell other people about it. Okay, so he's just taking the other theory here. This is the Sartre. Then we know the outcome of the adventure. We know that we survived the snowstorm in the Himalayas and that we have thwarted death. This makes the adventure less serious and more playful and changes it from deadly to aesthetic. Quote, just like life, which in the moment it is being lived appears formless and upon death becomes a biography, that is to say, acquires an organic meaning and retrospective sense of direction, the adventure that in the moment and in the mind of the adventurer could end tragically in hindsight and a posteriori acquires an aesthetic character. End quote. Just like Sartre, Yankelevich emphasizes the narrative element of adventure, but unlike Sartre, does not diminish the adventurer's character of the lived adventure. The anticipation of being able to tell someone about the story is something which motivates those who seek adventure before and during the adventure, and hence an integral part of the experience. When adventure becomes a story, we are able to share it with others. A story also becomes a work of art, and hence the experience of adventure allows people with no artistic abilities to create something beautiful in the sense of an aesthetic adventure. That's unfair. I think that's wrong. Being able to craft a narrative, you could have an adventure and be a shit storyteller. This happens all the time. Someone has an adventure and can't be the person to tell it. Like, that happens. So this is kind of funny. But the fact that they had the adventure means that someone else could craft the story, but it does mean that you can say that they sort of made the raw material for the arts, but they didn't make the art themselves. But that's just a little bit funny. But you as a shit artist or a shit storyteller could do something impressive aesthetically in terms of the adventure. That's fair. Okay, Yankelevich does see an essential difference between a recounted adventure and purely fictive one, however. When the ending of the adventure is known beforehand, as in the case in a fictive story, which can be written with the ending in mind, the adventure loses its character of uncertainty. I mean, this is unfair because the writer, the writing of the book might not be an adventure for the writer. The writing of the book is an adventure for the reader. And so they are the ones on the adventure. Now, the writing of the book for, say, because I had Shane in chat, Tolkien, maybe Tolkien knew the end of The Lord of the Rings when he set out to write the book. Maybe. I don't know. That's not the adventure. The story isn't the adventure for Tolkien, something else. But this is just a little bit weird here, what the author's saying. The author is not the one who's uncertain. It's them creating the adventure for the reader, who definitely does not know the outcome of the story. So there's definitely uncertainty when you start reading a book. Okay. Interestingly, Interestingly, Yankelevich relates this to the clear beginning and end of an adventure. Quote, when the adventure, like the work of art, has a beginning and an end, it ceases to be an adventure. Yeah, it becomes the narrative. This once again relates to the Sartre's view, who also stresses that fictive adventures are told with the ending in mind. Although their reasoning is the same, their conclusions are diametrically opposed. For Yankelevich, fictive adventure is no real adventure at all, while for Sartre, adventures are in books and not in real life. Thus, for Yankelevich, the aesthetic adventure is more playful than serious because we know the adventurer survived, but it's still important that he or she lived through some kind of danger in order for the story to not become just a story and thereby too playful. Yeah, there has to be at least some uncertainty. You have to at least feel some risk to the characters in the story. Otherwise, there's no point in them going on the adventure. In the final of the three basic forms of adventure, the love adventure, playfulness and seriousness interconnect in an almost indiscernible way. Especially erotic adventures are frivolous and playful and are often prime examples of a break with everyday life, even more so than other types of adventure. However, there are also love adventures, those that are less about carnal desires and more about a feeling of intimacy. In these adventures, the other person may go on to play a role in one's everyday life as partner. Such adventures also come with the possibility of heartbreak and hence have a tragic and serious side to them. Like the deadly adventure, they can fail, and this failure can have an impact on everyday life. Yankelevich also stresses the difference between woman and man and says that for the former, love adventures are more serious because of the possibility of pregnancy, while for the latter, they tend to be more playful. Thus, although very much a playful break with the seriousness of everyday life, it is still connected to it. Therefore, the love adventure is a serious game. And this is something Viper's brought up, maybe in jest, maybe not. But there's different risks for men and women. Sockner says, I'm going to write a paper on this, right now, stopping my coding mind needs to put some ideas down. I'm glad you're inspired. I mean, I think this is a nice essay. Yankelevich is ultimately positive about adventure like Simmel and unlike Sartre and de Beauvoir. He sees it as something that is able to liberate us from rigid, serious social structures. Adventures remind us that social hierarchies are not set in stone, but mendable. It allows people from different social groups to step outside their comfort zone and get into a love adventure, and it allows people to step outside their comfort zone and try new things. To sum up, for Yankelevich, the experience of adventure is constituted by a series of events in which we anticipate an uncertain future, which lead to an oscillation between playfulness and seriousness. He strongly emphasizes the break with everyday life, which is usually either too boring or too serious. While adventures always exist in contrast with everyday life, they are always connected to it, for example, because of the danger of dying or getting seriously injured and thereby either ending or altering life. It can also change our love life outside the love of the love adventures in which the love interest is seduced. The goal-directed structure is emphasized less than in the other authors, but is still present in the form of the future that is anticipated and the uncertainty whether the adventure will succeed. Furthermore, Yankelevich stresses that the adventure changes in hindsight and gains an aesthetic dimension. However, unlike Sartre, he thinks that the experience of adventure and the recounting of past adventures are much more intertwined because we anticipate that we will tell others about the adventure when it is happening. Once again, anticipation is the main element in Yankelevich's theory of adventure. Yeah, so now we've got, this anticipation thing is the thing. It's that we don't understand the future, but we're tying our current present experiences all in some sort of unified anticipation towards a goal. There isn't necessarily a goal, but you have a unified anticipation. So that's what's going on here. So that's interesting. Well, at least different from the other ones. Conclusion. What is it like to experience an adventure? What makes this kind of experience unique while it encompasses many kinds of activities? We've discussed 4 authors who have answered this question. These thinkers all have their own theory of adventure, but we can nevertheless discern 3 general characteristics of adventure from them. The first one is emphasized by Simmel, Sartre, and Yankelevich, and that is that adventure exists in contrast with everyday life. This is in itself very interesting as an understanding of nature The nature of what it is to experience adventure immediately causes us to think about the contrast with other types of experiences. Adventure has something special about it. For Simmel, this has to do primarily with the content of the activity that is regarded to be adventurous, and therefore is not part of the routine of everyday life. For Sartre, the feeling of adventure also exists in contrast with the monotony of everyday life, gives us a fleeting sense of purpose which he considers to be illusory. Yankelevich contrasts adventure with the boringness and seriousness of everyday life, which both lack the anticipation of the future, which is central to adventure. The second characteristic plays a role in all four authors. It is the goal-directed structure of the adventure. In adventure, goals are more clearly present than they are in everyday life, in which we tend to do things out of routine or habit. In an adventure, we need to reach a certain destination, such as the peak of a mountain, conquer a love interest, etc. It is, however, not always certain whether we achieve this goal or not, and this brings about a subcharacteristic, namely the tension between the certain and the uncertain. Simmel states that we throw ourselves into an uncertain situation with the idea that we will certainly succeed in achieving our goal. Sartre emphasizes that all events that constitute an adventure gain their meaning in light of the goal, but also states that because we do not know whether we will achieve the goal, that true adventures are illusory. We attribute a certain meaning to an event as if we already know where they are heading, while this is not the case. De Beauvoir is critical towards adventurers precisely because they are only interested in their goal. However, they do not really care about the goal itself, but only care for the conquest of the goal. This makes them akin to nihilists because they do not truly care for the world and others around them, but only about achieving their own adventures. Yankelevich emphasizes this characteristic of adventurers the least, but he does say that adventure is the perpetual anticipation of the future and hence oriented towards what the future holds. He also emphasizes the element of uncertainty, namely the fact that we do not know what the future holds, yet know that it will come and that we do not know whether we will survive our deadly adventures, but nonetheless know that we will die one day. The final characteristic is that adventurers change their nature in hindsight. This element plays a crucial role in the theory of Sartre and also is also discussed at length by Yankelevich. For Sartre, the goal-oriented structure of adventure is something we can only impose upon our life in hindsight when we recount events. Oh man. Over 3 hours. All right. When we know the outcome of our endeavors, we can attribute meaning to the events leading up to this outcome, creating the idea that life had this structure all along. However, this leads to frustration as we can never live our life as if we know where it is heading and what the significance of every moment is. Hence, adventures cannot truly be experienced, at least in the proper sense. We can still have the feeling of adventure, however, because we can fall prey to the illusion that our life is leading up to some kind of clear goal. Yankelevich also says that adventures are transformed when we tell about them in hindsight because the outcome and especially the survival of the adventurer who is recounting the adventure is guaranteed. This causes the adventure to become aesthetic and less serious. However, he does not think that fictive adventures are not the same as real, recounted adventures, as the outcome of the adventure was not known when it happened. He also says that this element plays a role in the present because adventurers anticipate that they will tell a story about their adventures afterwards. Yeah, the fictive adventures are not the same as real. I may have missaid that. These three characteristics therefore give us an answer to the question concerning the phenomenology of adventure, or in other words, the question of what it is like to experience adventure. Adventure consists of a break with everyday life, causing the events to feel new and exciting. Furthermore, we have the idea that we have a clear goal ahead of us that we need to conquer somehow. While we do have goals in everyday life, they are not as clearly present and do not as clearly constitute the significance of every event that happened as it does in an adventure, in which the goal is much more urgent. Last, just like adventures constitute a break with the mundane everyday events that precede them, they remain with us as stories to be told. However, we must keep in mind that once it is over and we know the outcome, the fundamental uncertainty disappears and the character of the adventure changes. Frank says, I super don't buy clear goal, but everything else seems good. Yeah, and Sartre's with you on that. That was what Sartre was criticizing, that we have a clear goal, but that's only an illusion in our heads. So, that's definitely an important point that like you might fool yourself into thinking there's a goal, but like it's not. There's no guarantee there. All right. Thus, whether it is the break with the monotony of everyday life, the clear goals that we experience in an adventure, or the significance that they hold when we recount them, adventures are always meaningful. They are episodes of life that at least seem to be especially meaningful. This allows us to see the desire for adventure in contemporary society. An adventurous lifestyle seems to be the equal. It seems to be the equal to a meaningful life, something everyone seems to stride for. Stride or strive? Yeah. Commercials and popular media eagerly play into this desire by promising us products that lead to adventure or show us the stories of adventures whose meaningful deeds make our lives pale in comparison. Whether the need for adventure is something positive or negative remains to be seen. The aforementioned authors hold different views when it comes to this subject. It is seen as something positive by Simon and Yankelevich, who think that we can attain life lessons by going on adventures, learn something about ourselves, or learn how we can change society. For Sartre and de Beauvoir, there is also a lesson to be learned from adventure, but this lesson is a negative one. For Sartre, adventure gives us the illusion that life is leading up to something, which may cause us to be confronted with the fact that this is not the case, and that the significance of events is not as clear as the feeling of adventure makes it out to be. De Beauvoir shows that it looks like adventure is a way to escape the clutches of nihilism, but also shows that it is awfully close to that because of the disregard for the people encountered in the adventurer's conquests. This negative aspect becomes especially pungent in light of the fact that the people who can go on adventures are usually already in a privileged position with regard to their socioeconomic background, race, and or gender. In any case, adventure, just like many other fundamental modes of experiences, reveals something about our lives, whether that lesson is positive or negative. Hooray! We made it! Or I made it. We made it. Okay, now what happens is we have an emote review. Anyone in chat, that's all of you here, are free to use the emotes you can see in chat below and on the screen to rate the paper. Use a brain dance and spelling and capitalization count here. Thank you, Frank, for a yay and a brain dance. So brain dance if it had some fun ideas, major brain dance. Nog scream for existential or artistic drama. Nog Ouroboros for deep or ancient ideas. Nog knife for slicing and dicing arguments. Nog navel for navel gazing only for academics. Nog turd for all style no substance, still poop underneath. And nog grapes for big claims that shrivel up. You can also use the global Twitch emotes vote yay and vote nay, and my vote meh. I do calculate an overall score. Everything in the green will make the score go up, everything in the red will make the score go down, and the vote meh actually makes the score go towards the middle. Sock now also gave it a yay. Thank you. Yeah, so, I mean, as I said during the paper, I have a soft spot for people who identify new areas of philosophy and talk about them, or like an understudied concepts, and I guess adventure would fall into that. So I have a soft spot for this stuff, so I'm generally, sympathetic to this sort of philosophizing. So what am I going to give it? I am generally going to say I'm going to give it brain dance. Socknow also added a knife and a navel gazing. Cody said, I mean, wasn't here for it, but you think it's a meh? Cool. Give it a brain dance. I thought I had some fun ideas because, I mean, the idea of the different ways to play around with adventure I thought were fun. I'm going to give it a Nog Scream also because I'm going to give it 2 Nog Screams because this was really, I mean, we're talking about a lot of existentialist philosophy. We've got Sartre, de Beauvoir, and also what that adventure is kind of like a meaningful thing to our lives. So we're going to get the double Scream. Let's see. Is there anything else I want to say about this? The Ouroboros for deeper ancient ideas. I mean, this does go back a long way to like sort of like mythology of adventures. So, I'm going to give this a Nog Oro as well. That was not it. Sorry about that. No good, Nick. Nog Oro is my autofill is going to no good, Nick. Sorry, no good. Okay, so this is going to be a well-rated paper. So I thought it was fun. It talked about some classic ideas and had a lot of existential flavor. The navel gazing was a start. Fine. I mean, You don't have to like all of the paper. Like, it's cool. So, do we have anything else? Scream makes sense. I am undecided. Okay. Yeah, I mean, we also don't have to agree. I've disagreed quite a bit with chat over the years. And so, yeah. You're not sure about the aura, though? Yeah, I mean, the idea is more the mythology of adventures. Like, it goes back to Odysseus, like the classic adventures. So this is why, is that this is not just talking about art, but like why I see this as, you know, talking about old ideas. We've had this idea of like going on journeys for a long time. And so like it's a weak Ouroboros, but I'm giving it because it's at least touching on some of these like old concept of like mythologies and like these great travels. So yeah. I mean, that's just my reasoning behind it. Like, there's no reason why, like, you don't have to be, like, this doesn't have to be a hardcore, like, review. It's like, it touched on it. I thought it, so it's fair enough. Okay. But, get your ratings in. Anyone who is here, feel free to do so. You got a minute left. If anyone has any questions about this, please let me know now. Like I said, my brain is fried, so we're going to get out of here in a minute. See who's live. Guess it did make you think? Okay. Hey, gave it a brain dance. How nice. Cool. Frank jumped in. You're not implacably opposed or anything, is don't really see it. Hey, fair enough. Not everyone, you don't always have to see everything everyone else sees.